Today's episode of Market Talk is brought to you in part by GrowMark FS. Keeping up on the latest in ag is a challenge to say the least, but there are experts nearby ready to help. You'll find them at your local FS. You can trust them to bring you customized agronomic grain and energy solutions born of the latest thinking. That's because FS specialists receive continuous training that keeps them current on the latest trends, practices, and technologies. So you get local expertise that's both exceptional and up to date. Visit fssystem.com to learn how FS is bringing you what's next. And a good afternoon. Welcome into Market Talk for this Thursday, November 11th. Happy Veterans Day. Thanks to all of our veterans for their service to our country. And we thank you for joining us here today on Market Talk. MarketTalkAg.com is our home on the web. MarketTalkAg.com. That is where you can find us and find all of our streaming sources and more. Well, the markets opened today on Veterans Day, and we saw some mixed action on the grain board. Let's talk about all of it. Let's bring in our good friend Bryan Doherty with Total Farm Marketing joining us here this afternoon. Bryan, good afternoon to you, sir. And, a fairly quiet day overall here on this Veterans Day.
Yeah, Jess, at the end it was quiet. We had some fireworks early on, but you're right on that. Happy Veterans Day to all our veterans and for those who served, and yeah, good day for them for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We need to recognize them.
We definitely
Um,
do. We
yep.
definitely do. No, and you mentioned a little bit of fireworks at the beginning of the trade, but then we kind of fell off the highs and we just kind of settled mixed. I know wheat was kind of the leader today. Soybeans at November contract trying its best to catch up to January in price, and corn was just kind of the weak leg of the three. It seemed here today. Overall, what's your thoughts after the close?
Yeah, I think you summarized it well. Corn ended up being the weak link. It was had a pretty good morning going, but again, it seems to get up in that. You look at December corn up around that 575 area. Boy, that just seems to be a point that's going to pull cash corn out. I'm sure of it. Um, that is a good price to take a basis off of that. At fall, looking at just the alternatives to prices in recent years, it's pretty terrific. Um, Seems to be well supported. That needle seems to be biased to the friendly side. Just got off the phone with a guy, and when I say a guy, farmer, and in Iowa, and he was just saying, my observation is I just don't see the corn piles on the ground, and we had good crops around here, so he's wondering what gives. And I came back to him. I said, I've been crisscrossing the Midwest now for a long time, and I saw a lot of shiny new bins over the years, but to that point, we didn't build a lot of new bins the last 3 years or 4 years. I do wonder if we're still kind of backpedaling a little bit from 2018, and in particular 2019, what appeared to be smaller crops, and it took a long time to kind of figure that out. And to his point, this farmer's point, he said, we're looking at bins this year in town that were basically empty at harvest, and normally they have some in. So, maybe it's a carry-in issue too, or we do have more storage, and farmers are plugging it away and really not needed cash flow, or maybe it's a combination of things. But quietly, the corn market finished. Beans, modest gains. I really don't know if there was anything under that market other than maybe some reverse spreading of selling corn, buying beans. Weather in South America just looks, I think, right now, arguably very good. There's not you're not hearing much. That's because there's not much to hear. And then wheat continues higher. Saw some things today. Maybe you've already talked about it, but maybe some real stress starting to develop between Ukraine and Russia, um, and maybe some concern of flow of wheat out of that part of the world.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I think another thing with wheat too, another story, there's all these little nuggets out there. I know today Brazil, they approved the import of GMO flour. I know Argentina's got GMO wheat that they've been planting down there. I mean, so some of those things with the wheat market, you look at that. That's one other little nugget there as well, I feel like. And that's also I know Conab raised their estimates for corn and soybeans in Brazil as well today.
They did. Still below the USDA number though. So the chicken or the egg, CONAB or the USDA. But to your point, kind of in a bigger picture perspective, we saw this in other countries. I want to say in Europe too earlier in the year with corn that I kind of there's, I think, a little ring of truth to this beggars can't be choosers. So when
Hmm.
supplies start getting pretty tight, it's like, well, we probably wouldn't prefer to bring in the GMO, but we're going to bring it in anyway because we need it. We're tight. That's what I think anecdotally what the market signal is still that the world has, on a macro picture, responded to very cheap prices for many years. I don't know how many times you and I were in Kansas City at the National Association of Farm Broadcasters talking about, when are these prices ever going to move? They're kind of range bound and they're stuck. Well, that's a function of either big supply or at least the perception of big supply, but demand over time builds to cheap value. And, we talked about it 1,000 times. Where else can you go out there and buy something for less than it costs to produce it? But that's the way
Hmm.
it's been for the corn market for years, and maybe even wheat market for end users most months out of the year.
Let's step back and look at that November WASD report that we had on Tuesday, and I know as well some surprises there. Not a whole lot of changes, but that slightly lower soybean yield really gave us the momentum to turn this bean market back around. What are your thoughts here now that we got a couple days of trade in after that November WASD report, and just some of the feelings that we have in this grain market overall?
Well, sometimes a guy wonders about things, and I wonder how when we appear to have pretty good moisture or timely moisture in August, how we don't really increase the yield on this report, but on the quarterly stocks report when we had a dry August last year, it reflected in a yield increase. So I'm being a bit snarky or sarcastic, but it was a little bit of a surprise considering sort of the trend of yield that we thought we were hearing throughout the harvest with soybeans said, well, they fared pretty well. The old axiom is keep them alive until August and give them some rain, and they'll do well. Well, that happened to a lot of farmers. Now, that's not to take away anybody in these dry regions, in particular Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, big pockets of Iowa, all over the Midwest, where you had these drought monitor spots that really look kind of mean. But overall, heard some pretty good yields. So to see and hear that number was a little bit of a surprise, and the market responded quickly. You saw that beans were also bang 50 cents up in a hurry. I don't know if that was, somebody saying, "Hey, this was not the negative report we expected. Let's start buying in earnest," or if the market just popped and then what we call buy stops, orders placed above the market, Jesse, that when the market price hits or goes through, they become what's called market orders, which means they buy immediately. And those orders can come from farmers, they can come from traders, anybody can place a buy stop order that's in the market. So sometimes you get a lot of those stacked up when the market hits. You get a ton of buyers instantaneously, and they have to find sellers, and they only find sellers at higher values. So um, that might have been part of it. And you think about it, the market had been trending down, down, down. There probably weren't a lot of sellers, with sell orders above the market. They're just waiting for the market to rally before they looked at selling. So had to find those sell orders.
Definitely. Well, we look at the markets, we think about, the holiday season coming up here, and typically, we don't see any changes from USDA till January now. So it almost feels like that maybe the tone is set in these markets here moving forward the next couple of weeks. What are your thoughts about that?
It kind of feels like it. November's a big report because it can kind of put the bow on the crop in essence. And in recent years, when we've had, well, last year in particular, as well, just wait till we get to January, we'll get all those, revisions, and nothing happened in January. In fact, if I remember, they might have added yield. But um, typically, that's it. November report, then you go to December, you get a report, but you don't get a yield estimate in that report. Then you go to January, you get the last report for the year. So with all of that, it's one of these scenarios where um, there might not be a whole lot of new news for some time unless it's weather out of South America or something on the political front or some other front we don't know right now.
So if I'm a farmer, and I know you mentioned you talked to plenty of folks here in the last couple of days. I'm sure there's plenty of folks today sitting around getting rained out or snowed out with the remaining harvest. So they're looking at those marketing plans. What would your best advice be to them if they're looking at things here the next couple of weeks, heading to the holidays, heading to the end of the year, tax season, etc. Any good key advice for them here in the next couple of weeks?
I would say this. I would say don't lose sight that prices are high and that you can extrapolate, well, if they're high now, just wait to whenever. That might be fool's gold because whenever could mean that we have record South American crops. And so prices don't have to move high. I've heard that from some farmers saying, well, if they want it this much now, what's it going to look like down the road? Well, there's a ring of truth to that, but I would still be cognizant of encouraging, or from a farmer, rewarding the rallies, keeping your paycheck. If you know how to use futures or options, you're a phone call away from owning if you want. Doesn't have to be in the bin. Um, I'd go with that. The other thing I would go with too is kind of watch the calendar. It's a long time until next year, but sometimes when we have what is appeared to be a post-harvest recovery or a smaller crop, and it's at high prices, sometimes that high for next year could come early. And so really monitor this. These corn trading near 550, November beans close to 1250, 1225. Those might warrant some more attention, in particular if there's a little bit more push in these markets. Think about selling some ahead.
Bryan as well. We didn't have weekly export sales today, and we'll get those tomorrow. We'll see if those have any effect on the grain markets. But also flip it over to livestock. We've been watching those weekly export sales in livestock. They've really been a tone setter towards the end of the week, and it feels like here today, just kind of quiet action again, mixed action, feedlot country. Better cash trade again this week. What's your overall thoughts on the livestock market?
Well, it's been a slow and steady, let's say, turn higher from when prices kind of, as you and I talked, I was using the kind of the terminology, they sort of hit the wall or they got over their skis and they took a pretty hard hit. And that was toward the end of summer, early fall. And then they've kind of consolidated. Now they've been kind of in this steady grind higher uptrend. I like it. It tells me that we're probably putting supply through the pipeline and not worried about shortfalls of supply. There's kind of in Brian Doherty's world a seasonal tendency in the live cattle market and maybe feeders to find a low sometime late summer, early fall. It looks like maybe we've seen that. I want to stay optimistic. This COVID world we live in is still turning things upside down, so we're not really sure, you know, of a lot of things. But it looks to me like we have a well supported market. I don't want to again overpromise and underdeliver, but I'm just not fearful of the live cattle market all of a sudden nosediving. I don't think we've got this great wall of supply we didn't expect or anything like that. Um, you mentioned earlier rain, snow, that time of year. Rain snow mix is mush. The feedlots get kind of messy. Not usually great for weight gain.
Mm-mm.
That's holiday season's coming, so I like to think things are well supported.
On the hog side, there's some talk of maybe getting some chain speed increased, and if there's enough workers and trying to maybe get through more of the supply of hogs. And you think about it, the grocery store, the holiday season, I'm hearing more talk of more hams in the freezer versus turkeys and etc. Just because there's a lot of pork out there, and looking at the prices and et cetera, et cetera. I wonder if maybe an increase in chain speed would help out the hog market and help us cut through some of this sort of backlog maybe of hogs in some spots.
Boy, you'd sure like to believe so or think so. And you'd kind of like, I mean, maybe I'm a little nostalgic here, but pre-COVID, you'd kind of like to go into the grocery store and see these big boxes just full of hams waiting to be sold and not looking at meat counters that are half empty. Um, I think the demand is there. Consumers are looking for it. I don't know if we're going to be able to get the kind of the robust overseas demand from China. I just don't know if we have that economy continues to have some unravelings that are sort of unnerving. Um,
Mhm.
Especially this, I think it was, it's pronounced Evergrade. They missed a bond payment. Um, this is, and their hog herd, in theory, is back to where it was before 2017, the breeding herd. So with a slowing economy or some economic conditions that maybe are not robust over there, I think we got to be a little careful not to rely on the Chinese export market to pork as as the kind of market it might have been 18 months ago, 12 months ago, 6 months ago. despite COVID here at home. So that'd be my big concern there. And I look at those summer months around $94. Just looks to me like probably need to defend those prices in some capacity.
Brian, great insight as always. Any thoughts on the dairy market here today?
Well, a lot of volatility. It's picked up some steam. We're 5 to 11 higher today as I read the quotes. It's been really volatile, especially the front months. Man, sometimes it's just light volume and you get this big run up in price and big drop and real volatile. But let's kind of step back and take a look at the bigger picture. I look at all of the contracts for 2022 every month. So you look at every month, and every month that I see that I can see here is above $18. And a lot of them pretty close to 19. So when you look at an average price above 18 in a market that has a really tough time sustaining anything more than $20 for more than a few months, I would certainly, if I'm a dairy producer, start thinking about how do I hedge a percentage of my production for all of 2023? And then how do I, if prices move higher, hedge another level or sell another level and continue to build that average price? I think in the big picture, Jess, the dairy market has a tendency to do things very well from the production perspective. They're efficient. The milk per cow has increased. The overall trend continues to increase with um, bigger and better, I call better, bigger operations, more reliable supplies of milk. Um, it's going to be tough to sustain high prices because the ability to sort of ramp up production is so quick. Um, and this has all happened in the last 15, 10 years. Same sex semen, carousels, 24 hours day milking, that kind of thing. There's a reliable source.
hmm hmm Well, Brian, great insight as always. And I know if folks need some advice, they could reach out to you and the team there at Total Farm Marketing simply by picking up the phone and giving you guys a call, can't they?
They can. 800-334-9779. Always a pleasure to visit and have a quick discussion. And hopefully we can bring some solid value to that conversation.
And you can also learn more at totalfarmmarketing.com. You could find that number there as well. Brian, we appreciate the time. I know next week we'll see you in person in Kansas City at the Farm Broadcasters Convention. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can't wait. That's going to be great. Look to see the let's say the egg community start to get out and about again and really just get back to the business of doing business and meeting people and making things happen.
Well, we look forward to it. Until next week in Kansas City, Brian, have a great weekend and we'll talk to you soon.
Jesse, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. Good luck.
Brian Doherty with Total Farm Marketing joining us here today on Market Talk for this Veterans Day, November 11th. Find us markettalkag.com. I'm Jesse Allen. Have a great afternoon.